Hi, I'm Lacey Healy, and today we're taking you to a strike just outside St. Louis, Missouri, where machinist Brianna Donnell just saw the planes that she helped build overhead.
That was spectacular. Like, I'm always inside of work, working on making new parts for an F-18 or a 777X, and when I finally get to see the aircraft, the pieces that I make to the aircraft, when I see it flying, that motivates me. That keeps me going. You know, I'm very ecstatic and very happy about that. And that's definitely what I'm fighting for.
When we talked to her in October, Brianna and her colleagues had been walking the picket since August 4th. And after all of that time away from the assembly line, she just wanted to get back to work.
My life before Boeing, I was living check to check, and, shit was kind of hard.
But she was sticking it out because other workers had it worse.
As I started reading the contract and got more understanding of how it was treating our senior citizens, I did not agree with it, and I do not agree with it. So I'm ready to get back to work because I love what I do. I enjoy what I do. And, if we even settled with the first contract, I would have been happy. But I'm happy that I'm sticking it out with the union and that we are going to receive the best outcome.
St. Louis has been tied to war making for a long time. From the Civil War ironclad riverboats that helped Ulysses S. Grant gain notoriety to the jet age. Most recently, Boeing just got a contract for a new plane, the F-47. But military experts like Iraq Army vet Stephen Quackenbush, who is also a professor at the University of Missouri, say that the city's relationship to Boeing is at a crossroads.
The F-18E and F Super Hornet program is coming to an end. I think production is supposed to stop in 2027. F-15EX is not going to last forever. So, what is that next generation going to be? I think that would be the real question about the future of Boeing in St. Louis.
After over 100 days, on November 13th, Brianna and her colleagues reached a settlement with Boeing, one granting them higher wages and a signing bonus, but altogether less than they'd hoped, and not far from the original offer that Boeing had put on the table. The company had been hiring permanent, non-union replacement workers, and meanwhile, members were worn out, worried about the upcoming holidays, and said the company had just had more money to wait them out. Across the country, folks like Brianna depend on these jobs, even when they struggle to gain the respect that they feel they deserve. But what does it mean when whole communities depend on them too? Today on Things That Go Boom, St. Louis was once known as Fighterland, USA. But as some members of the community fight to bring back that moniker and the business that came along with it, others aren't so happy with their role in waging war.
Hi, I'm Susan Glasser.
I'm Jane Mayer.
And I'm Evan Osnos, and we host the Washington Roundtable from the New Yorker's Political Scene podcast.
For me, this is the water cooler. This is a wonderful chance to sit down with two of the smartest colleagues in the country and, just kind of compare notes.
No, that's so true, because first of all, we are actually friends in real life, but I can't wait till Fridays to hear what you guys think. Everybody sees the headlines, but you guys fill in the gaps.
I also think, though, occasionally we get somebody to come on, and I'm always smarter for it. If you get a great historian who can tell you about a presidential election 50, 60 years ago, often it can help you understand about what's happening today.
So if you're looking for weekly insights into what's going on inside the Beltway, please join us every Friday on the Washington Roundtable, part of the New Yorker's Political Scene podcast.
From Zuckerman Spader. For 5 decades, Zuckerman Spader has been a leading litigation firm trusted by in-house and outside counsel, businesses, and individuals. With offices in Washington, Baltimore, New York, and Tampa, Zuckerman Spader serves clients throughout the country and around the world in high-stakes disputes, enforcement matters, investigations, and at trial. When the lawyer you choose matters most. Online at Zuckerman.com. This show is supported by Odoo. When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
When our reporter Sophie Hurwitz visited the picket line, they noticed a theme. Just like Brianna said that she was sticking it out for the old-timers, it was the people on the cusp of retirement who said that they were sticking it out for the newest union members. People like Rick Perdue.
You just can't say, I got mine, get yours. That's not right now. Because I'm a union man from the start to the end.
The older guy said, oh, I'm here for the younger guys. The younger guy said, I'm actually here for the older guys so they get a better wage progression.
For Sophie, St. Louis has always been home.
I was born in St. Louis. I am also kind of obsessed with St. Louis. I love the parks. The museums here are all free. We have the confluence of the Missouri and the Mississippi rivers here. I love the food here. You can get pretty much any cuisine in the world for like $20. People say the barbecue's really good. I don't know that because I'm vegetarian, but I love how much my friends get into that.
These days, though, there's another St. Louis that Sophie's been getting to know, the one behind the factory walls.
I am a reporting fellow for Inkstick. I focus primarily on the St. Louis area, which means that I spend a lot of time thinking about Boeing.
But that wasn't always the case. Growing up, even Sophie's parents didn't know that Boeing was making warplanes and missiles in town. People just talked about it as a place that had good jobs.
It is quite easy to live your entire life in St. Louis, Missouri, and not be aware that Boeing is a military contractor. Interestingly, I was not really aware that Boeing was a military contractor until I was an adult, until I was in my 20s. I knew lots of people whose parents worked for Boeing. As I got older, some of my friends started working for Boeing, but it was never really talked about as a military company.
But they say that in their reporting, they've seen the city's relationship to the industry and what it makes here changing.
The awareness that Boeing is a military contractor, that a lot of the tech companies in town will contract with the military. I'm seeing more and more of that awareness. I also think that the number of jobs Boeing is able to provide people in St. Louis seems to be decreasing. And that's another reason that people are starting to question, like, is this really a good deal for us?
And is the Boeing strike a part of that?
Kind of, sort of. St. Louis has been pretty defense dependent for about 100 years.
To understand how St. Louis became so tied up with warplane jobs, we have to remember that in the early 1900s, St. Louis was one of the biggest, most important cities in the world.
The home of the 1904 Olympics and the 1904 World's Fair, and the ice cream cone was supposedly invented in St. Louis, and there's debate about whether that was the case or not.
That's Stephen Quackenbush again. He studies war and peacemaking in his job at the University of Missouri, but his first degree was in aerospace engineering. He told us that before Boeing was in St. Louis, plane building was run by a company called McDonnell Douglas.
Actually, when I was a kid back in the 80s, there was in a magazine, Air Force magazine, there was an ad for the McDonnell Douglas F-15E. And in the fine print, you could mail in and request a poster. So I requested a poster, and it was hanging on my wall of the F-15E. And I thought, I'd never been to St. Louis. I knew nothing about St. Louis other than that's where McDonnell Douglas was, and it would be a great place.
Apparently, Mr. McDonnell, the company's founder, wasn't from these parts.
McDonnell was actually founded in 1939, McDonnell Aircraft Corporation, I think it was called. McDonnell himself came from Milwaukee and had been involved in a company there, but then moved to St. Louis.
St. Louis had the people, the music. It was the city where you wanted to be. So McDonnell relocated, and the company started making parts for other aircraft during World War II. Then, as the Second World War became the Cold War, the company produced its first plane.
They were a fledgling company at the time. Then they became a maker first of naval aircraft, like a series of the F-1H Phantom.
Then the F-2, the F-3, the F-101 Voodoo.
By 1954, they debuted the F-4. And the F-4, is frankly one of the greatest jet fighter aircraft of all time. And I think one of the most mass-produced. And it was in production from the 50s and through the 80s.
And while McDonnell put St. Louis on the map for defense production, by the millennium, the company had seen two buyouts. first in the 60s by the Douglas Aircraft Company in California, and later by Boeing in 1997.
One of the things we've seen is a consolidation of the aerospace industry over time. Personally, I feel saddened that it's Boeing and not McDonnell Douglas, because I feel that fighters are the coolest aircraft, and that Donald Douglas was very focused on fighters, and Boeing is less focused on fighters. Boeing has always been more about bombers and cargo aircraft and big aircraft like airliners.
Which was kind of the point. Sure, at the time, Boeing's acquisition of McDonnell Douglas looked like a great deal for Boeing, which had a way lower stock price than the fighter jet company. Not such a great deal for McDonnell Douglas. But there was one reason that McDonnell Douglas shareholders had to be optimistic about the deal. See, after the Cold War, the future looked pretty bleak for the Top Gun crowd. War didn't look like such a sure bet compared to the average American's next jet-setting vacation. McDonnell Douglas did make some commercial planes, but they were besmirched with high-profile failures. The idea was that a company that was better at commercial aviation could offer new opportunities for St. Louis aerospace workers. A bump in business, more job security, and if necessary, a move back into more commercial aviation under a more respected name. McDonnell Douglas hoped that the merger could help save them from becoming irrelevant in a more peaceful world. And that prediction held true. Until it didn't.
And tonight, a shocking revelation about the Boeing 737 MAX.
But Boeing as well, reporting its biggest annual loss since 2020.
This all comes more than 2 weeks since a 737 MAX, operated by Ethiopian Airlines, crashed shortly after takeoff.
It's been a tough few years for Boeing. And while its commercial revenue has been rocked by safety issues, federal fines, and C-suite turmoil, its defense workers, like Brianna and Rick in St. Louis, they've been holding the company's stock upright. Sophie says that the company's history hung in the background of Boeing's recent strike.
So the last time Boeing workers went on strike, it was actually McDonnell Douglas at the time. This was right before the merger. Back then, about 6,000 unionized machinists went on strike. Now the number is closer to 3,000. So I think that in and of itself, that number shows that while Boeing still bills itself as, I believe, the biggest exporter in the United States, and they still are making a ton of money, maybe also losing a ton of money, but making a ton of money, the number of regular people here in St. Louis benefiting from that money might be shrinking.
It's an old story. Squeeze more profit out of workers and hand it to shareholders and executives.
Boeing thinks they can really, kind of starve people out, right? Because they're not really making money while on strike. But the guys I talked to were finding ways around that.
I'm drawing my Social Security. I'm 67. Going out hunting, fishing. I got back from Pennsylvania.
Oh, nice. Okay.
They also took strike jobs as packers, FedEx drivers, making sandwiches at Firehouse Subs.
One of them pointed out to me that he's actually making more money right now as a rideshare driver for Uber than he made as a full-time Boeing worker before the strike.
So in 2.5 days, I make about $800, and I make $750 in 5 days of work out here.
What do you do here?
I'm a missile inspector.
You inspect the missiles?
Yep.
And you get paid more driving Uber than...
Yep.
Boeing's leadership said that St. Louis workers shouldn't be paid as much as workers in Charleston or Seattle because it's a lot cheaper to live there. Brian Bryant, president of the International Union of Machinists, had some strong words for that.
That's absolutely disgusting when the company says, our Midwest wages. What the hell are Midwest wages? There's not that much difference between here and Seattle. Very unfortunately, I had to talk to people that, look, I'm on strike because I can't afford to live. I can't afford the necessities of rent and such for my family based off the wages that I made. Now, that's a lot of those are entry-level people, entry-level members that have just started. But that's what this strike is about.
Sophie says that the truth is maybe somewhere in the middle. St. Louis isn't the boomtown that it was in the 40s. Decades of deindustrialization and population decline have left it economically depressed, which has made things truly cheaper here. But what does cheaper mean in a country where almost 2 out of 3 people can't afford basic costs nationwide? Plus, organized labor isn't really about how expensive it is to live, but about getting a piece of the money that you generate for the employer and leveraging that power.
When they're negotiating for higher wages, they keep hearing that they aren't worth as much as Seattle, that they're only 2% of the workforce, despite producing far more monetary value proportionally.
Jody Bennett, the local union vice president, told workers at a rally that the Seattle union had set a standard for what defense work was worth.
It sets a tone for negotiation, but what you guys have done is you've proven through your strength and through your skills in providing defense systems that are, bar none, the best in the world. You've proven your worth.
At one point during the strike, workers voted on a contract that they would be happy to sign. But Boeing called it a publicity stunt.
It ain't a fucking publicity stunt. What it is, it's a sincere effort on our part to get what you deserve.
One of the narratives I keep hearing on the picket line over and over is that Boeing CEOs always come out on top, no matter what the workers do.
The guy's making millions of dollars a year.
Yeah, he's making millions of dollars a year. All we want is Bird to throw a little more chicken scratch over her, and we'll go back to her. That's all we want.
Boeing's former CEO, David Calhoun, made $33 million in 2023, which calculates out to nearly $16,000 per hour. Meanwhile, some of these workers are working full-time building things like tail kits for bombs or fighter jets or drones, and they're visiting food banks.
One of those workers, Mason, told us that each of the bomb kits he was building was worth a year of his salary.
Kid in daycare at 9 months old because my wife has to go to work. She should be able to stay home, take care of the kid, and I get to make the money here. I'd not have to worry about going to the food pantry or paying bills. And then they want to say, we're essential workers back when COVID hit. And then now this strike comes and they said, oh, we're only 2%. We don't matter. When they that's a stab in the chest. It sucks.
Another guy, an inspector, was chatting with his family. They all have jobs at the St. Charles plant. And it was clearly on his mind that sitting outside the factory might mean that a plane leaves the plant with something wrong with it.
With last strike, that board fell out of the sky and 2 people lost a lot. And it was a piece of fog that stuck the plane going up. So what I hope is resting on the smart guy's mind is people's lives.
And that's one of the reasons that this strike caught the eye of the whole country. Both Bernie Sanders and Republican Missouri Senator Josh Hawley called on Boeing to negotiate and stop the strike.
Brian Bryant, the president of the International Association of Machinists, came to St. Louis to speak to them earlier this week.
Are the best damn fighter pilot mechanics and missile builders in the house? Yeah! Absolutely! Absolutely!
A lot of them do really see themselves as being in this kind of essential support role for the U.S. Army.
But within the union, there's also an undercurrent of something else.
They're definitely in a minority, but I have spoken to members of the Boeing Machinists Union who consider themselves anti-war and hope that by building labor power within Boeing, they might at some point be able to garner some kind of say in what contracts Boeing takes on. One of the younger folks I spoke to who is trying to kind of build a more critical presence within Boeing says that a big part of the reason that nobody's really asking, hey, why are we building bombs in the first place, is because until recently, there haven't really been a lot of young people in union leadership. And so I think that could be counted as a very small win if you're optimistic. But I think that for people like him, people within the Boeing Machinists Union who hope to limit the harm this company does, it's going to be an uphill battle.
Uphill because most folks on the line are proud of what they do.
You have a vested interest in seeing this company succeed. You show up to work to produce a product that keeps America safe.
But I'm a red-blooded American. I want to see Americans be safe and fly.
Well, what they work on directly affects Taiwan.
Yeah.
And the war pending over there.
Yeah.
But even though this strike was not an anti-war action, it was kind of making it harder to do war.
Boeing is the fourth largest Department of Defense contractor in the nation, and their business in St. Louis pretty much almost entirely depends on federal contracting. So local politicians are really pressuring Boeing to get back to the table. They want to see those planes produced, and they do have some contracts to fulfill. Boeing's vice president, Dan Gillian, has also admitted that the strike is slowing production down in some ways. I think that another big external factor is the F-47 contract that was offered to Boeing, I believe, in March of this year. That is not even in production yet, but it can't really move forward until this is resolved. So I think the external factors are, you saw Pete Hegseth talking about turning this country into the greatest war-fighting machine ever or whatever. So, we are in the midst of a tide of militarism, I think that's fair to say, and this is gumming up the gears a little bit.
For folks like Jody Bennett, that pressure was seen as important to getting Boeing workers a better deal.
They said they were losing money on defense. I call bullshit. But they're using money. Why are you continuing to chase defense work if you're losing money? Exactly. It's because you're not. It's because you just got the F-47, which is going to give you 30, 40 years of sustained billions, possibly $1 trillion in revenue.
But even as St. Louis prepares to welcome that big new contract, some folks in town are asking whether this industry should be there at all.
I don't think that you should unionize to tear down the Amazon rainforest. I don't care if it's fair trade labor. It is an unethical situation. I don't care if you are unionized and you are killing children by making bombs and warplanes. That job should not exist.
That's coming up.
Who am I? I'm Maxi Glamour. I'm the anti-fascist fairy. St. Louis, all the way.
How are you today?
I am enduring this new wave of fascism. How are you?
Maxi Glamour is maybe best known for their role in the Boulet Brothers' Dragula. But they've had a lot of costume changes both before and after.
I got kicked out of my house at 17 for dressing in drag. I lived out of my car, and I drove my drag mother, who was a sex worker, around the city, and she would find truck drivers, and then we would stay in motels. And after the pandemic, after I got on television, I was like, I want something different.
Today, they're a ward committee person in St. Louis. They run a nonprofit for LGBTQ housing, and they're also planning to apply for a PhD in philosophy.
I tried to take all these things and throw them into the world and make some peace out of chaos.
For Maxi, queerness is deeply tied to their anti-war work. And there's no way that this was more obvious than when they fought alongside other activists against Boeing's involvement in St. Louis Pride.
Last year, they were the main sponsor of the Pride Parade. They've always been a sponsor before, but they were the main sponsor during an ongoing genocide.
They were calling on Pride to turn down sponsorship from Boeing.
We organized a protest. We created a campaign. We created lots of media, shared lots of times, made lots of phone calls, and let people know that there's no pride in genocide and that they should recontextualize their relationship with queerness.
And did it work?
No, not at all. They acted like they didn't know that there was a genocide going on. They acted like they didn't know that Boeing was responsible. And they acted like there was nothing that they could do because they already had spent the money. So instead of Pride having the audacity to say, actually, we have too much ethics for you, Boeing decided that they wanted to divest from Pride themselves.
The corporate tide has shifted in line with the White House's policies on DEI. So the anti-fascist fairy wasn't surprised to see Pride lose its funding. Maxi's view on the situation was pretty stark.
We do not need to pinkwash our campaign anymore because we're living in a fascist state, so no one cares if we're donating to LGBT organizations. We can still keep manufacturing weapons of war, and now we don't have to do any media campaign, any image laundering, because no one cares about images. And so Pride was did with the short end of the stick, and now, since the lack of funding, they're charging people for admittance.
Sophie says that just as St. Louis has a long history as a military economy, it also has a faction of people calling for something different.
since the start of Israel's bombardment of Gaza in October 2023, the spotlight has really been on Boeing because they are one of the primary suppliers of military gear to the Israeli army. And we saw that in the student encampments last year. Washington University in St. Louis, one of our biggest universities, possibly our biggest university, definitely by money anyway. Washington University has a ton of entanglements with Boeing. And then on the legislative level, there's this ongoing effort to oppose or eliminate tax exemptions to military manufacturers locally. It's called the Not Another Nickel campaign. So I think there are a few different pressure points within the broader St. Louis community where people are starting to pay a little bit more attention to this and ask whether it's worth it.
Those voices also have a history here, a history that Sophie is working to uncover.
There was this moment when cities like St. Louis were bringing in outside economists and experts to try to talk through, is there a way that we can turn, for example, this defense plant into a car parts plant?
In the 90s, as Cold War production slowed down, a group of Rutgers scholars and St. Louis locals wrote a report called Changing the Future.
It was produced in 93, which was this weird archival gap when nobody was digitizing things, really. I think we are the first people to have, a digitized version of this, so.
The report details what it might look like to convert St. Louis's defense plants and make other things.
There have been these moments in the past when a pivot away from militarism has been talked about as both possible and economically beneficial in the long run, because being dependent on one giant contract, that contract itself being dependent on endless war, is maybe not a viable strategy for consistent cash flow in a city like this.
But for many anti-war activists, deciding how much to support the union building bombs and warplanes is a tricky needle to thread.
The local DSA branch passed a resolution saying that they were in support of the workers and that they would, go engage at the picket lines while also offering anti-war pamphlets. So it's kind of this tricky balance between people who want to support striking workers who are out for a better wage and out to get back at their millionaire bosses, and then also not wanting to endorse the products those workers are making. And then there are absolutely also activists in St. Louis who think that supporting defense unionism is a complete waste of time.
St. Louis is a rowdy space, We are a dialectical, revolutionary, badass place. And within revolutions, within that dialect, you have to have conflict.
St. Louis has many more problems than the defense sector. A history of redlining and segregation, allegations of white supremacists on the police force, population decline and high crime rates, people can't pay their bills. Pushback on the defense industry is pretty low. But to Maxie, these two things are connected. It's all of St. Louis's local problems that make it an easy mark for defense contractors.
We have a lot of people who are trying to uphold the system just so that we can have economic empowerment for St. Louis because we have been so divested from, right? We have the highest amount of loss from the peak population of any major city in the country. We have hyper vacancy. And so on this side, we have, people who want business here. They want industry. And on this side, we have people who don't want to be complicit in a genocide. And so we see these two ideas clashing. So I would not say that we are anywhere near a monolithic sense.
And nowhere does that clash become more obvious than when Maxie looks at the Machinists strike and starts asking questions that some people would prefer unasked.
People are like, oh, well, you need to be supportive of them. You really need to look at it from the perspective of they can't just quit their job. My rationale is they can. We have radical freedom. We are not constricted. You could always quit your job. There will be consequences. I've gotten a lot of pushback because there have been a lot of socialist organizations who are looking at labor rights and labor organizing around Boeing in particular, and the people who are making the fighter jets and the warplanes. They are on strike and they're trying to bargain with their union to get better treatment. And I'm like, I don't think you should have a job.
Maxie says they're not alone. Other people in the anti-war movement don't want to do this either. But lately, Maxie's also been pushed by people to see another side to all of this.
They humbled me, they added different perspectives, even though I still didn't agree with them organizing. They were like, this is what we got to do. This is how the labor unions are moving. So we're going to show support. I think sometimes when you're younger as like an activist or into like leftist ideas or Marxism, you think that revolution is injustice, is instantaneous, but it is more like a garden in which you have to plant the seed or bulbs and maybe wait till next year to even see a little bit of foliage. And so I need to take a step back and realize what really is going to ameliorate the situation, and how do we allow the people within Boeing to self-actualize, come to the terms themselves? How do we organically allow culture to shift their perspective around war through the unions and just allow them to do their thing and just be an annoying little sibling being like, okay, what about war now?
Maxie says that if the union was clear about refusing to make weapons of war, then that would be a different story.
If the union said we will not make weapons of war, we are organizing to ensure that we are going to sabotage this system, we can use collective bargaining to have proper consequences. I think that would be a great way in which unions can organize the way out of this. What I am seeing is union members saying we want to be paid fairly. We want more money and better benefits. And I don't think that that form of organizing around this issue is going to benefit anyone besides the people who are already selling their souls to make weapons of war.
Of course, it's not that easy. To build representation in the union that's more critical of weapons manufacturing, you have to get elected and build relationships. You can't just jump in right away and say, I don't think we should be doing all of this. But the kind of resistance to the defense industry that Maxie's talking about, it's not just targeted at Boeing. There's also a movement in St. Louis against ICL, formerly Israel Chemicals Limited, which is expanding in the area.
They have been reported in Israel as being one of the worst ecological harming companies in that country, and then they came to St. Louis.
ICL is also a target for anti-war activists like Maxie because the company has supplied the U.S. Army with white phosphorus, which can cause lung damage, organ failure, and deadly burns that can't be helped by water.
It is a burning thing that comes down and burns the flesh off of individuals. It is a horrendous chemical. They're tax abated, they get money.
An ICL spokesperson sent us a statement about that, saying that under a previous contract, an ICL business unit supplied the U.S. Army with white phosphorus produced by another manufacturer. The spokesperson told us that the last order under this contract was in 2023, and that ICL has not supplied the U.S. Army since. They also told us that ICL doesn't make white phosphorus. It uses phosphorus to produce phosphates for food production and industrial applications.
They already have 2 locations in the south side of St. Louis, just down the street from my house.
Recently, ICL was allowed to open a new plant on the city's north side.
Already disinvested from a Black neighborhood that has already suffered ecological harms, and they're building a 3rd location in St. Louis. And so a lot of people are really scrambling right now to see what we can do. How can we use online campaigns? It's an uphill battle, but I think that the beauty of liberation is sometimes recognizing that you are Sisyphus pushing that boulder up that uphill battle, and that there might not be an end of it, but I think that you just have to perpetuate that continuous force against things, or else you'll be crushed by the weight of it all.
Sophie told us that the push to attract heavy industry like ICL and to boost defense tech is part of a larger plan to reinvent the St. Louis economy.
There are also a lot of other smaller defense contractors that basically subcontract out to Boeing. A third arm of this is St. Louis's efforts to build a defense tech hub here.
It's become almost a cliche of the post-industrial city, trying to become the next Silicon Valley of insert niche here.
Actually, an article came out saying that St. Louis could be the Silicon Valley of defense. I think that there are folks in this town that would very much like to see an expanded defense economy locally.
Sophie says it kind of looks like a toxic relationship. The less St. Louis gets, the harder it tries.
People who want Boeing to stay in St. Louis feel a lot of pressure to make that happen politically, whether that is with tax breaks, whether that is with other incentives to keep Boeing here. So many of St. Louis's other core industries from the 20th century are really shrunken or gone. Like, way back in the early 20th century, this was a shipping hub. and it was a brick-making city. And until more recently, it was a beer industry hub. Anheuser-Busch got bought out by InBev, which is a German company. And so all these things are shrunken or gone. And now the main legacy industry we really have left is war making. Fighterland, USA.
It's a nickname that you can still see on the back of old T-shirts from union members in town.
Boeing actually, as of this year, has started trying to bring back that nickname in some of their marketing. But I think that Boeing's attempt to kind of bring Fighterland USA back, something that nobody in my generation had really heard of, respectfully, is really indicative of this attempt to kind of, rather than demilitarizing St. Louis, moving it towards being even more of a defense-dependent place.
Next time on Things That Go Boom.
And I went back in there, and I immediately told the executive board, I said, listen, there's going to be thousands of people who are going to be marching down to the port to protest an Israeli vessel, and I'm going to be marching with them. And I said, and if anyone crosses that picket line, that would be a point of departure that they would never live down. And of course, people said, oh, no, we're not crossing the picket line, Clarence.
Things That Go Boom is distributed by Inkstick Media and PRX. Come see us on social at Inkstick Media anytime. And thank you to all of you who have been leaving us such nice reviews. It really feels great, and it helps our show get in front of new eyes. This episode was produced by Katie Toth, Sophie Hurwitz, and me, and edited by Nikki Galtland and Christina Stella. The music for our show is written by Darian Schulman, and Robin Wise makes our show sound its very best. Thank you, as always, to the supporters and the foundations that make our work possible. The Carnegie Corporation of New York, the Cologne Foundation, and Plowshares Fund, as well as Inkstick supporters, including the Riva and David Logan Foundation, Craig Newmark Philanthropies, Prospect Hill Foundation, and the Jubitz Family Foundation. We'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Our local beers are really good, by the way. Way better local beer economy here than pretty much anywhere else I've seen, even though, like, our beer giants have been very much bought out. The beer's really great.